Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have a book review of the middle grade book, Star Wars Young Jedi Knights Diversity Alliance by Kevin J. Anderson and Rebecca Moesta. This is I believe it's the 8th book in the Young Jedi Knights series. I've read most of the Young Jedi Knights series. It's actually one of the first Star Wars series that got me into reading when I was younger. For some quick context, the first Star Wars book I really read that was like an actual book, not just pictures, was Cloak of Deception, and that was an adult book, but I was, 10 years old when I read it, and I loved it, but didn't really read any other Star Wars books. And then I read the Young Jedi Knights. I read about 5 or 6 of them that my brother-in-law had, and he gave them to me. I was still pretty young at the time. And then got into all the rest of the Star Wars books. But I have since gone back, and I went to a bookstore in Virginia when I lived there, and they had all 14 books, and they were like $2.50, $3 a piece. And I was like, I'm definitely getting those. So I got all 14 books. Some of them, I don't have all of them like in my stack right now because some of them are on my TBRs for the next few months. But I was going to go through quickly what I've thought of the previous ones and then talk about the one that I have here. So the first book I think is the weakest book in the entire series, and that's Heirs to the Force. It was an okay book. Wasn't great. Shadow Academy, one of the most action-packed books. Very intriguing, very compelling book. The one that's most underrated, this book that not many people talk about, but is a personal favorite of mine, The Lost Ones. There is a scene in here at a banquet table that is where a character eats something they're not supposed to eat. That scene is one of my favorite scenes in literature. I love it. I love the way that Kevin and Rebecca play it, and I love the way they handle that character a lot. It's one of my favorite characters in the series. So I love this book. This Electric Lightsabers is the best book in the series. I acknowledge from a writing perspective, this is the best book. But, and I really enjoy this book quite a bit. It was the first Young Jedi Knights book that I read. But what makes this book so good is what it does with Tenel Ka and Jason and their connection and what happens to her in this book and the deep themes that it has. And Kevin and Rebecca really swung for it with this book, and they got it. Then we have Darkest Night, which is, a weaker book, but still entertaining. Really sets everything up for the finale of this arc of books. And then you have Jedi Under Siege, which is a decent finale. I actually hadn't read this book until recently, and I thought it was pretty good. And then they start this new arc of books. So they had 6 books under this arc, and then they decided to start a 5-book arc, and that was the not Shadow Academy. The first 6 was the Shadow Academy. The second set of 5 was the Diversity Alliance books, and they start with Shards of Alderaan, which I gave a pretty good review, but I'm going to be honest, I don't remember much about this book. I remember a few details about it, but overall it didn't stick with me long term, which is not something good for the book. But now we're talking about the book that I'm reviewing today, the book I just read, my first book that I read in 2023, I should say, and that is Diversity Alliance. I had never read this book before, so this was like a totally new experience for me. And as I was reading this book, I read it all in a day. It's a pretty quick read. It takes about 2.5 hours to read this, maybe 3 hours if you're a slower reader, but it's a pretty quick book. This book tells the story of Jason, Jaina, Tenel Ka, Lobaka. They all go with Luke and Raynar Thol to escort him back to his mother, who is searching for his father, who has disappeared. And so the first half of the book is them bringing Raynar back to his mother and then being on his ship. And then when Luke goes back to the academy, the kids all say, hey, why don't we help look for the missing father? And so they go to a planet to look for the missing father. At the same time, the character of Zek, who has appeared in this series, he's the character I was talking about earlier that I just love so much in the series, Zek, who is training to be a bounty hunter, and so he goes off on a bounty. And what little do our characters know that they actually are connected, even though they're on different planets, and it's part of the bigger threat, which is the Diversity Alliance. This is a surprisingly deep book. I am amazed that So many people complain about Kevin and Rebecca's writing styles, particularly Kevin's styles with his adult books. They complain that he's not a particularly deep writer, that he just writes flat characters and flat stories that are pretty boring. I find his stories exciting anyway, that they don't need the character development because he just writes like fun action stories. And then I pick up a kid's book like this and I'm like, man, there's so much depth in this book. So he can write depth. He really can. And this series, this book in particular, proves that he can. So there's two areas of depth that I want to talk about. First is the more character-driven depth, and then the second is the thematic depth. So let's talk about the character-driven depth of Jacen and Tenel Ka. And Jacen and Tenel Ka, their connection runs the entirety of this series and into the adult novels in the expanded universe, particularly the New Jedi Order and the Legacy of the Force. Really a lot in the Legacy of the Force series. But in this series in particular, Jacen and Tenel Ka, I think, get the best, character development. Jacen and Jaina get some interesting because they're siblings, and then Lobaka and them as friends, but no two characters have a dynamic that works better than Jacen and Tenel Ka. And these are kids. These are, I don't know the exact age that they're supposed to be, but I'd say they're probably like 13, 14 at this point. That's my vibe that I get from them. Maybe a little bit younger, but 13, 14. And for one, they're the only characters who have like a couple aspect to them. They're never a couple in the series, but they have a kind of will they won't they tension between them. But also you can tell that Jacen feels things for Tenel Ka and she feels things for Jacen, but they're too afraid or too unwilling to admit those feelings. So throughout the books, and this book in particular, in this book, Jacen is just afraid for Tenel Ka. He's the reason she's lost her arm. He's the reason that so much bad has happened to her. And he's afraid something bad is going to happen. And he kind of feels he needs to compensate for that, for his guilt. And so he's trying to do things to help Tenel Ka, to protect her. He's always concerned about her. He's always thinking about her before he thinks about anyone else. And you see some of that, it's like, you don't need to be guilty. She's forgiven you. It's really wasn't entirely your fault. Like, we understand, yet he still won't let go of that. So there's a little bit of a Jacen, calm down. But at the same time, the fact that he's caring about her more than he cares about himself shows some interesting character development from him. And then on the flip side, you have Tenel Ka, and we rarely get to see her perspective. And if we do, she's not thinking about Jacen. In most books, she's thinking about the situation at hand. But here we get to see Tenel Ka thinking about Jacen in one scene. And she actually admits to the reader, not to the other characters, but to the reader, she admits she actually quite enjoys Jacen. She likes his jokes. She actually wants him to tell her jokes. But she's afraid that if she admitted that she'd lose her warrior girl power facade, and that she would, that something bad would happen if she admitted it. So she has to pretend like she doesn't actually like his jokes. But in reality, she loves the way he tells silly jokes. And she feels that he gives her kind of a lightness in a world of darkness. Like he's the light factor, the calming factor. And then there's another time in this book where they're fighting some arachnid creatures. And at one point, it picks up Tenel Ka, and you can understand Jacen's. It's not just a fear of his friend. It is, oh my goodness, she's going to die. It's my fault. And he works so hard to try to free her from the arachnid. And then after that is determined, I am not going to let that happen again. And Tenel Ka kind of plays it off as the warrior girl. Like, really? You're going to protect me? That's rich. So she kind of plays it off like that, but you can tell in the subtleties of the way Kevin and Rebecca write her, that she kind of is glad that he wants to kind of protect her. She's kind of glad that he cares so much for her. So they just have this interesting dynamic that's really played off later. I don't know if Kevin and Rebecca knew that they would have the story that they'd have in the future, and if they really meant for an overt romance, or if they always intended it to be kind of a flirtatious, not exactly flirtatious relationship. But man, it's just sweet the way he cares for her and the way she cares for him, and the way they won't admit it to each other. And then So that's the kind of character depth that this book has that really is evident in a lot of the books, but this is like one of the most overt that you see it. Then we also have the thematic depth, and that comes from the idea of the Diversity Alliance itself, which I don't know if it's got to be an obvious idea of the Diversity Alliance is looking to seek reparations from the humans and appears to just be this, let's build up the alien species. And it appears to just be, let's just build up these species to make them better because they've had bad lives. And Lobaka, who is part of an alien species, he's willing to admit, yeah, we need to build up the alien species. And so he's kind of going along with this idea, and he and someone else who shows up in the book, who I won't spoil if you're reading along with the book series, he and this other character are talking about the Diversity Alliance, and they're like, you know what? That's not a bad idea. But that's just the facade that the Diversity Alliance creates, that they only want to elevate the aliens. The thing is, when you dig deeper and understand what the Diversity Alliance is about, they don't just want to elevate the aliens. They want to elevate the aliens, and they want to destroy the humans. They want payback from the humans. They don't want just money. They don't just power. They just want land left. They want to actually kill the humans. They actually want to fight the humans, and they want the humans to experience the pain that the humans have put, that some humans, and even though there are innocent humans, just like there were innocent aliens, in their mind, they're lumping a lot of the humans together and being like, well, you've had your day in the sun. It's now our turn to oppress you. And I think that's explored, if my memory, because I don't really remember the later books as well as the earlier books. I believe that is explored in others, but it is well explored here in this book titled Diversity Alliance. And it's quite funny that it's on the nose that the title of the book and the title of the organization is Diversity Alliance. And I gotta wonder if Kevin and Rebecca meant to be on the nose, and if they meant to be so prescient, because the themes in this book are so relatable. And there is a nuanced discussion, as I mentioned, of there is an element of, yes, you want to elevate the aliens because they've had hard times and you want to help them out. You want them to do better. You want them to be on equal footing. But then when you realize the real purpose behind the organization, that it's actually to also destroy the humans, I was just like, that is such an interesting idea that they're proposing in this book. So, and they don't actually like outright make political comments, but it's just an interesting theme that they explore that I liked. Also, this book has a dark moment. It's really quick, blink and you miss it moment, but it happened and I was like, wait, what? You just did that in a kid's book? You just did that in a kid's book. Whew! Like, obviously death is going to happen in these books because these are books about kids wielding lightsabers. Like, that type of stuff's going to happen. And in fact, one of the books, a kid loses an arm and doesn't get a prosthetic arm. Like, they lost the arm, it's gone. So they deal with some deep questions, but there is a moment in here with the Diversity Alliance. Whew! Man. And Nola Tarcona, I've only just started to read about her here. I can already tell she's going to be a favorite villain of mine because she's just written so compellingly and so horrifyingly. So, boy, I loved this book, and I'm surprised that I loved it so much because it is a kid's book. It's really short. You'd think there's not that much to talk about in a short kid's book like this, but there really is, and all this depth was there. And yes, some of the plot line wasn't exactly the most impressive. It didn't have... The plot wasn't incredibly innovative or original, but as I said, the themes were so good that it makes up for the plots. So I would give this like a 9.1 out of 10. Really entertaining book. I still think that of the other books that I've read, like for sure Lost Ones I think isn't as good a novel, but it holds high place nostalgically for me. And I think that Shadow Academy is much more interesting a book, but it does not deal with the depth that this book deals with. I think the only book that's actually a better book than this is Lightsabers, maybe. But even then, this is a deep book, so I'm very impressed with it, very happy with the results. So If you've read the Young Jedi Knights series, what do you think about the series as a whole? What did you think about this book? Did you pick up on those themes as well? I'm super interested. I plan to read about one of these a month for the next 2 or 3 months. I don't know whether I'll finish out the whole arc because I still have 3 more books in the arc. I don't know whether I'll finish out the whole arc or only do part of it, or we'll see, but I have them on my schedule. So if you've read this book, let me know all that thoughts in the comments down below. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.